Hey, another day, another project in the shop. I finished those wine holders and now I'm ready to move on to a different project. The question is, do I go and show everybody who's a first-year student how to make a footstool, or do I move on to another project that's really more geared towards the more advanced student? Let's go with the advanced word first. Then what we can do is go back and make a simple footstool, probably knock that off pretty quickly. But let's start thinking about a box. And I've seen this happen all the time. Somebody's going out with somebody, they want to make a jewelry box, something special for that person for either their birthday, a holiday. And it comes to me and I'm approached with, well, what size should the box be? What you guys have to keep in mind, and I've said this 10,000 times, is that the thinking part is really the most important part of the whole project. It's like Burger King. This is one of those places where when you look around, you have all this shop, all this different types of wood. There's no limitation with anything. You can make anything you want. Get what you want. Have it your way. So the question is, what do you want? If you want to make a jewelry box for somebody special, well, you want to think about it. You don't want to just say, okay, I'm going to make it. Because that is exactly the mistake most people make in here. They create sawdust. We have a bunch of sawdust and a bunch of pieces that are discarded because when somebody really thinks about what they want to do, they go, wow, I made that too long. Wow, I made it too deep. I made it too large. I've had students who have been given this project right here as a requirement. Make a box. And some of them make a box that looks like this, which is perfectly fine. An oak box, probably about 2.5 or 3 inches high, deep, probably about 7 or 8 inches wide, and probably about 10 to 11 inches long, which is absolutely fine. I've had other students who have taken that assignment, blown it up where they wanted a hope chest. I had people make a toy chest. They're basically the same project. The only difference is we changed the size a little bit. Let's take a look at some boxes and some choices that you guys are going to have to make. If I look at this one over here, which is the oak one that we pointed out, which came out great. This is an oak top, oak sides, and an oak base. It's hinged, which I'm going to require you guys to do. And the question is, what material, number one, do I want to make this project out of? A few videos ago, we went through about 25 minutes of deciding what kind of wood you want to make your project out of. Do you want to make it out of pine? Easy to work with, easy to stain, gets dinged and dented a little bit. Do you want to make it out of a better wood? You want to make it out of a wood you want to paint. You want to make it out of poplar because you're going to paint the thing? No, it's wood, it's personal. I want something that's warm, that shows grain. How about if I make it out of oak and I stain it? Oak's a great staining hardwood. No, you know what? I really like the color, something that's dark and rich. Maybe like this, like walnut. Well, maybe the concern about walnut that you have is the cost. All of these things have to be factored in. Do I want it out of maple, ash, cherry? I can make it out of spruce if I wanted to. You can do anything. The hard part is to think about exactly what you want to do. If you are in my class, you get a set of a bill of materials. My bill of materials, I have it laid out so that all you have to do is cover your ears if you don't want to hear a nasty 4-letter word. All you have to do is read. You would have to read all this. And it will go over any changes that you make on this box, any sizes, or anything you want to accommodate in there. I had a student who made this box as a cigar box, a humidor. Humidors were really popular probably about 5 to 7 years ago. But what he did was he made the inside of it lined with Spanish cedar, which is exactly what you want if you know somebody who smokes cigars. I know less people smoke cigars than before. But there are steps where you would just go down here, check it. When you finish each step, when you get to the end, which is step number 42 in here, you're getting pretty close to the end of this project. Also, you can look in books like Woodworker's Journal, Wood Magazine, that usually give you a good example of what you're going to get if you look at the picture. If I look at this, I notice that this is tiered. There's drawers. I have one student who's working on this already. A description, but not written by the bald guy with the long nose, a description written by somebody who you might not understand. So the advantage to that plan is that that is written in words that you know. If you go by a regular set of plans, you'd have to think a little bit more and try to understand and decipher what somebody else meant you to do. So if you look every single step, just got this sudden urge to back up. I don't know what that was about. But every single step is gone over, and usually at the end, there's a bill of materials, a materials list that'll list all pieces by their thickness, width, and length, which you guys should all know. So Woodworker's Journal, Wood Magazine is a great resource. You could use the resource that you have with me. You get this set of plans if you're in this class. I am going to use my set of plans sort of and just try to give you a quick overview on how you would go about doing this. The other thing that will dictate sometimes the size of the box you want, if it doesn't really matter, is you look at the materials that we have. If you walk over to that wood rack, you're going to get certain widths of certain materials that are different if you choose a hardwood. So if I have let's say a board of poplar that I want to make my box out of, if the poplar is 11 inches wide, when I think about it, I would be able to get two, probably 5 1/4 inch wide pieces of wood out of an 11-inch box, 11-inch wide board. And that might dictate how deep I want my box to be. Not the width. The width is really this measurement here. We're talking about the depth of the box. So materials often dictate what size you want to make your box. Now here's what I'm doing. Of course, you're going to operate differently. I was walking around the shop one time and somebody cut a piece of wood and it happened to be a very unusual grain. It happened to be a piece of curly oak. So what I did was, instead of tossing it out, and it wasn't a board that a lot of people would use, I put it off to the side. As a matter of fact, I cut it in half so I would be able to glue up this material and get a nice top to something, or maybe a cutting board. So come over here and take a look. These are two really wild pieces of curly oak. If you look at it, it almost looks like a hologram. If I move this, I really like the way this looked. I took the board, I jointed it, I put it together the way I want it to go with these two O pieces facing each other if I glue this up. And I just decided, you know what, Shimko, I'm going to use that for my top. I'm going to make this box around that. No size or anything like that, although this size board will dictate the size of my entire box. How does that happen? When I put these two together, I get a measurement of about 6 3/8. I want a 1/2 inch overhang on my top to overhang that side. As a matter of fact, I want the same amount of overhang on the sides as I have on the front. So if I add a 1/2 inch here, a 1/2 inch here, the top is actually going to be 1 inch longer than what I need it to be. If you look at the back of this box, I always have the box so it's flush. If it's flush, it means there's no overhang on that back side. So the width of this box only has to be a 1/2 inch overhang on the front. So if I look at this board, which happens to be 6 3/8 wide, about 14 and change long, I'm deducing that I want my box to be 5 7/8 wide. Hold on, let me write this down so I don't forget. Look, my box. I am going to make my box 5 7/8 wide so I can use the width of those two boards as my top. And I said that board is probably like 14 1/2 long. I want to make my box 13 inches. so I have a 1/2 inch overhang on either side. So that's going to be the size of my top and the size of my box. My only question now is, how deep do I want the box to be? You know what? I found a piece of wood walking around the shop, and maybe that will help me figure out how deep I want it to be. Here's a piece of oak that somebody used. As a matter of fact, I might have used this for another project. If you look at it, it has a live edge over here. It also has a check here. But if I look at this area over here, I could probably get 1, 2 pieces that wide and kind of avoid that check. The other thing that I might be able to do is cut this smack down in the middle. If I cut it smack down in the middle, then what I would have is an area that would be a lot wider, although I have to take into account this right here. Here's another thing. If you look at my bill of materials, I'll tell you something about the boxes that I really don't care for. If you make a box that's only this size, if you make the thickness of these sides to be 13/16, which is the exact width, the exact thickness that we get wood surface down to, the box is going to look too heavy. If you compare this 13/16 board with this board that's been surfaced down, this looks a heck of a lot better. If you make it too thick, it's going to look weird. So on my plans, I have you surfacing the board down to 5/8 of an inch, which is exactly what I'm going to plan ahead. So I'm going to be using that surfacer. Here's another thing to think about. If you look at my size, I said my sides are going to be 5 7/8 long to get that width box, which means that I cannot send a board through the surfacer that's only 6 inches long. I have to keep in mind that board has to be combined with this one when I surface it down. Let's take a look at my board that I have here. My board that I have is about 22 inches long. I could clearly get a 6-inch and a 13-inch. I could clearly get that out of this board and probably have about 3 inches left over. I'm going to use this piece right here. So I'm going to start the machining process by cutting this to a workable length. That's what I normally would do. When you think about it, I need probably around 19 inches or so if I combine those two together and then cut them down after I surface it down. Do I really need to cut 2 inches off of this board? Hell no, I don't need to do that. It's workable already. It's not like it's an 8-foot board, a 6-foot board. It's not even like it's a 4-foot board. It's workable for me. So I'm going to say that I can easily work on this. Where do I start this whole squaring up process? Because, I knew I was going to drop the chalk and forget about it. My boards are going to be surfaced down to 5/8 thick. That's what I'm going to do. I'm going to take that board, I'm going to start the machining process, I'm going to joint an edge, rip it to width on the table saw, then I'm going to go to the surfacer, surface them down to 5/8 of an inch, and then determine what joint I'm going to use when I put the whole box together. So let's start there. Let's take this piece of chalk. I'm going to say the piece of chalk's on the table because if I come back, I know I'm going to forget it. I'm going to take my board, take my handy dandy tape measure because I never know when I'm going to use this. Put it on the old belt, safety glasses on, and let's start the machining process. Okay. Yes, indeed, I'm over at the jointer. I'm going to joint an edge. So the question is, which edge do I joint? And I said to you 1,000 times, I asked it on a previous video, which edge do you joint? And the answer is, it's always the better of the 2 edges. But that's not your question for today. We'll talk about your question for today a little bit later. I'm going to joint this edge because it's better than jointing this edge. I'd be here until the cows come home trying to clean that one up. To do this, if I look at the grain, you notice that the grain is running in this direction. We talked about jointing downhill going along the grain. Downhill going along the grain? Maybe I'll put that as a question. Which direction do you joint an edge to get the best result? Nah, I don't want to ask that. All right, I'm going to start here, and I'm going to joint down to this area over here. Let me take my push block, move that out of the way because I'm not going to use that. And a quick review about how I'm going to do this. I'm going to turn the machine on. Left hand holds the stock up against the fence. Right hand is going to be on the back end of the board. It's not an 8-foot board, so I don't have to put it all back there. And I'm just going to push it through. Here we go. Sleeves rolled up, glasses on, everything looks good. Never stand directly in the back of the jointer. Left hand, right hand. If I put my right hand up here, this thing would be shaking like a dog crapping razor blades. So I don't want to do that. I want to keep it always at the level of the fence if it's a very wide board. Putting pressure down, not putting my hand across the knife until I get to the end. Am I done? No, again, I'm listening for a sound. And you can notice that that's still chipped. It's going to take me a little bit of time. I heard a noise all the way across. Edge looks good, but this is still chipped here. I'll do it as they say again. Still looks a little chipped to me. This is clean. I hear a sound. Always pressure completely in the back. Nope, do it again. I'm getting close. I'm getting real close. The time to worry when you're jointing is if you start jointing and you don't hear a sound after about 3 or 4 passes consistently across that edge. It would mean that you're putting too much pressure down in the front on this particular jointer and you'd be jointing at an angle. So if you pass it through 2, 3 passes, you should hear a sound that's pretty consistent across the entire edge. Right here, I'm almost there. I think maybe one more pass. I'm all set. Shut the joiner off, make sure the guard is back in place. Now what am I going to do? Let's take a walk over to the table saw and we'll figure it out. On this table saw, I want to avoid that check. So what I want to do is I want to take my tape measure, because I said it didn't matter how deep I make this box. I'll let the material dictate what I'm going to use or how I'm going to use it. The board is maybe about 6 1/4 inches before I come to that check. So I can probably make it about 3 inches deep and clear that check. I think that's what I'll probably do. So if you look at that edge, I think it's pretty easy to tell that that's my machined edge. Because sometimes I act like a jackass, I'll put an X on there so I don't confuse it with this bad edge. Next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to set the fence to about 3 inches wide. I'll loosen it up. I'm going to slide it over. If you look at my setting, here's 3. You know what I want to do? I'm going to make it a little bit more than 3. I'm going to make it like 3 1/16 or so. By the way, 0 to 12 on this scale, 0 to 12 is broken down into 32nds of an inch. So if I want to set this to any measurement that I understand, here's the 3, here's a 4. 3 1/2, 3 1/4, 3 3/4. Smack dab between 3 1/4 and 3 is going to be 3 1/8. So right there in the middle of that's 3 1/8. Smack dab between 3 1/8 and 3, 3 1/16. So if I wanted to set this to a certain measurement, 0 to 12 on our scale is different than 12 to 54 on that Biesmeyer fence. I'm going to set this, I said, to, let's go 3 1/8 for the heck. Now, you know what you do? Let's make it 3 1/16. I'm going to lock the fence down. I'm going to raise the guard up so, of course, you guys can see the saw blade cut. And it's important that you're entertained. I know how these videos go. If you don't see a machine cutting, you're bored by it. I'm going to raise the blade. How high should the blade be above the work surface? That's your question. How high, when you're setting this on the table saw, should the blade be above the work surface? And the correct answer, 1/8 to 1/16 of an inch. So just until that clears, of course, I'm not going to touch that. I'm all set. Fence is locked down. I'm going to cut 2 pieces, and then this will make sense after I surface it down. To start the saw, I'm going to hold on to my board. I want to get my push block ready because I'm no jackass putting my hands in between there. If I can't get my fingers in between that saw blade and that fence, not worth taking a chance. I'm going to start it up. Sleeves are rolled up. Glasses on. Nobody's in the back. L with my left hand. I'm going to put my right thumb on the back end of the board, use that as a push stick, and I'm going to push my board underneath my left hand. Wow, look at how close that is to the line I drew. At this point, I'm going to hold on to the board with my left hand. I notice some people hold on to the board like this. Are you kidding me? If I wasn't standing there, that board would shoot back at you. So make sure that you hold on to it like you mean it. I'm going to take the push stick, slide angle towards the fence. I'm going to push it all the way through. When I get to the end, drop my left and push it all the way through. By the way, who is not operating this machine by themselves? You. If you're in my class, you turn this machine on. Before you do that, you come get me. I'll stand there and grab the board for you. So here's one board, and out of this I can get a front or a back, and I can get one of my sides. I need another piece to get 2 more pieces out of it. Take a look at this board. This happens sometimes with an older blade or a blade that's a little bit off in how it's positioned. I have a burn mark here. Do I want to keep the burn mark? No, it looks awful. How am I going to get the burn mark out? A lot of people say sand it. No, I'm lazy. I want to do it as fast as I possibly can. I'm going to go back to the joiner. Let me shut the saw off. Wait until that comes to a complete stop. Come over here. I look at the grain again, start it here, and I'm going to push the board all the way through. This edge is a lot better than when I started. So I can probably get away with 1 pass. That's all I needed to do is to clean this up. Might I confuse it with this edge? Which one is the machined edge? I used to be a jackass. I learned from that. I better put an X there. You already set the fence to any different measurement, so this is all set, ready to go. I'm going to rip another board. Same exact way, L with my left hand. Hold the stock up against the fence. Right thumb on the back end, I'm going to send it through. Here's my L. Push block, and I'm going to push it all the way through. Get rid of that left hand when you run out of wood. All the way, all the way, all the way. I only move that out of there so you can see it. Take a look at this. So there's actually a crack on this back side of this, which isn't good. But remember, I need a 12 and like a 5 7/8, depending on the joint that I'm going to use. I could probably get rid of some of that, or if I'm smart, again, the thinking part is always what's going to make your project work out. If I start from this end, I'll get rid of this. If I'm an idiot, I start from this end, and this crack over here stays on my project, so don't make that mistake. I'm going to take my 2 boards over to the surfacer. Cameraman just went like this. Yaddy, yaddy, yaddy. Oh. This isn't it. This is it. I'm going to take these over to the surfacer. We're going to surface these boards down to 5/8 of an inch. Let's take a walk. Oh, yes. What is the shortest length that a board could go through this surfacer? The shortest length. The correct answer, 12 inches. So if I took one of these pieces and said, I need a piece that has to be 5 7/8 long, I cut it to 5 7/8 long, I cannot send it through this surfacer. That's why I combine a short length with a long length. The correct answer, 12 inches is the minimum that a board has to be picked up by the front roller and back roller on the surfacer. Do you remember how to set the initial setting on this surfacer? You do? If I come over here to the surfacer that we have, you have two adjustments. I have a locking handle and I have a crank wheel. I also have a readout here that's telling me how thick this board is. The initial setting is going to be, I loosen up the lock, I'm going to move the crank wheel down so that the indicator is at least an inch or below. I always said when you do this, you always adjust it on the upstroke. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the crank wheel and now move it 2 lines above an inch. What does that mean? Well, it means 2 lines above an inch, but it also means that your blind shop, oh, hey, there you are. Your blind shop teacher can't see that. So now what I'm going to do is, right there is about 2 lines above an inch, which is about 7/8 of an inch. Now what I'm going to do where the crank wheel ends, one more complete turn clockwise, and that should be just even for my initial setting. I'm going to turn the machine on. I'm going to choose the worst surface to clean up. So I look at this. I'm going to say maybe this side. And I'm going to say probably this surface. But when you look at this, and this is really important that you understand, when this came to us from a sawmill, it's not uncommon to see lines like this. This is on the surface planer that they used in the sawmill. They rough cut it to 1 inch and then they surface it down. We want to get those marks off as well. So when we send one side through, we're also going to critically look at the other side. Remember, if this is 13/16 of an inch, we're taking off about 3/16 of an inch or so to get down to 5/8 of an inch. So there's going to be a decent amount we'll take off this whole thing. I'm going to start this up and make my first cut, my initial cut. Up by the roller, so that's good. I'm going to loosen up the lock. I'm going to turn this a half turn. There's no reason to send the other board through because it's the same thickness as this one. I send it through. So I cut a little bit on the front and also on the back. I'm going to turn it another half turn. And I'm going to guess that that'll probably be pretty accurate. Cut across that entire surface. I'll do the same thing to this board because whatever you do to one, you have to do to the other. So both of these were done. And I got a lot of those little marks out. Every adjustment that I make is going to be a half turn clockwise. If I loosen up the roll knob, half a turn clockwise, I'm going to send it through again. This feels pretty smooth. This one's pretty good as well. I'm now going to adjust it another half turn. When do I stop? 5/8 of an inch. It has to be 5/8 of an inch. By sending it through, I can tell from experience 2 passes, it's not going to take me down 3/16 of an inch. But after this cut, I'm going to get a tape measure and I'm going to measure the exact thickness. So now I'm going to take this board. I already did this side. I'm going to flip it around. I'm going to do this side. I wanted to clean up the surfacer marks that came to us from the lumber yard after it was cut and sawed. So if I leave this, not going to touch it, put it in the vise, I'm going to measure to see how close I am to 5/8 of an inch. 2 pair of glasses. I'm not going to take it from the end of the tape. I'm going to take it from a hole number. So I put it right at 2. Right now I'm about 3/4 of an inch. I still have another 1/8 of an inch to go, which is going to be several passes. Somebody thinking for me, cameraman. If I had one surface that was worse than the other, I would send that one through. I'm going to send this one through more. I don't think it matters on this at all. Another half turn, always clockwise. When you're sending this thing through, I always tell you, you have to act like you mean business, you own this thing. Another half turn. It's not like you're offering it food. I am again. This looks a lot thinner than it did before. 2 pair of glasses. Take it from a hole number. Oh, maybe another 32nd of an inch. So we're going to go another half turn, which is the worst side because this might be my last. I'll send this side through. Side was my worst, I think. Yep. See if that was a 32nd of an inch. Yeah, I'm right there. I'm pretty close. I mean, I could take a hair more off. You want me to go another quarter turn because you like the sound? Sometimes this is like planing. If you angle it, it tends to go in a little bit quicker. Here are my boards. Here's the thickness. Next video, we'll take a look at cutting these pieces to a size and deciding what type of wood joint I want to use. Any questions? Feel free to shoot me an email. If you're in my class, tug on my glass strings and I'll be right with you. You guys have a great day.